What's going on, everyone? I'm Jay, and we're back again here. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Spro Coffee Q&A live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. here on the Spro Coffee channel. We're here to answer your questions and talk about coffee, talk about everything coffee. That's what it is. That's what it is. And here we are. Oh, my camera looks a little bit off. Hang on one moment. I think that's better. There we go. That's better. That's better. All right. So welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you being here again, where we talk everything about coffee and whatever's going on in the coffee world. All right. So first things first, as we always do, it's a pretty day here in Baltimore. We finally got some cooler weather from last week. Last week it was the 31st of August, and it was pretty hot. The strange thing is that the next day, Wednesday, September 1st, it's like the temperature just dropped, like suddenly 10 degrees and no humidity, and it's been cool but pleasant. Cool but pleasant. All right, so how are you all doing today? Good to see you. And let's get to the brewing part. All right, so today's brewing is going to be using the Bonavita brewer. And so this may look very similar to something you've seen before. So it's very similar to the Abid Clever. However, this one's a little bit different in that it's ceramic bodied, and then it has this one-way valve, or this valve that you press, that you move the lever, and it opens the little hole at the bottom, the orifice at the bottom. So that way you can allow the coffee to flow through. Now, just like the Clever has a valve that when you place on top of the cup, it presses the plate at the bottom, opening the valve and allowing the coffee to flow through. In this one, we just have this little valve that you just move out of the way, and it's just a silicone gasket, and it just kind of holds the coffee back. Now, some of the things about this one is that it is ceramic, right? And it's got ribbing. It's got the ribbing, as you can see, and the ribbing helps to keep. It's a little bit. You can see this. I use this quite often. That's why there's a little bit of coffee residue here. This is kind of the one I use here at the roastery, and it's a great little brewer. However, the MSRP is $65, and you know what? People, at least here in Baltimore, people just weren't that interested in paying that price point for a coffee brewer. So this one never really sold well. It was rather disappointing. It's a great brewer overall, but it's just not one that sold well. So that was disappointing. And I'm looking for another box because I'm noticing that our stand here is looking a little bit low. Still a bit low. All right, let's try this. Better, much better, much better. All right, so this is our Bonavita. And the Bonavita uses regular old Melita number 4 filters, just like this one. And as you can see, the Melita number 4 has these pleats. And the seam, you just want to fold it over and then open it up. And the folding of the seam allows you to seat the filter flat inside the brewer. And then, of course, we're going to take our coffee. Today's coffee is Kenya Getimbwe from Kenya. And we have it to a moderately coarse grind. Of course, we're going to make 12 ounces, so we're using 24 grams of coffee. All right, then we're going to take our hot water, our boiling water, and we're using the Hario Fit kettle today. And then we're just going to brew it. And let me lower it down just a little bit so we can see a little bit better. So we're going to add water and start our timer. Let me get the timer running. So we set our timer for 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes. And we let the bloom happen a little bit. And now we're going to make sure that we add water and fully saturate all the coffee while we're adding it. We're going to add about 350 mils, about 14 ounces of hot water. And the reason we're doing 14 or so ounces, because the dry coffee will absorb a lot of the water, or part of the water. And so in order for you to have the full extraction, you need to have a little bit of the, a little bit extra, right? All right, so now it's just a matter of waiting. Now, one of the things about this Bonavita, and I didn't do this time, and you certainly can, the ceramic is very hot at the moment, right? I can only keep it on the surface of the ceramic just like that. Otherwise, it starts to really burn. But because it's ceramic, it was cool. So you can pre-warm the ceramic. And also, you notice that I didn't rinse the filter. And I found in our videos from last year that we released that you don't need to actually rinse bleach filters. The bleach filters do not impart. I was unable to find any bleach filter that had any flavor to it. So if you're using bleach filters, you don't need to rinse. If you're using the natural paper filters, you do need to rinse. All right, so we're just going to let it sit there. Now, you can cover this with a top or not. You know, of course, without the top, the heat is dissipating faster. I personally tend not to worry too much about that, especially for my own drinking. When it comes to drinking my own coffee, I tend to be a little bit more flexible. Like, I know some people are very, very meticulous about what they're doing, but my own brewing, yeah, I can be meticulous, but it's not everything. I mean, already we're using great quality coffee. I have access to wonderful coffee, so whether it's my own or Spro's or coffees that friends have sent, you know, it's all wonderful stuff. So there's the biggest part of, the most difficult part of getting great ingredient of the coffee is already done. So there's a lot more wiggle room, I think, at least. All right, we're coming up, almost there. Okay, so once we've reached the point of the 3 minutes, now, here we are. We just take the Bonavita and place it on top of the cup. And then we simply open the valve. And you can hear the flow of the coffee into the cup. Still a little bit longer. So if you're just tuning in, welcome to the show. We're brewing the Kettle from Kenya. I don't know why I keep saying that. Roasted by our friends at Democratic Coffee in Copenhagen, Denmark. And then we're brewing that coffee through the Bonavita. I don't even know what it's called anymore. Anyway, the Bonavita kind of hybrid pour over that that features a valve at the bottom, so you can, what you do is you steep the coffee in the water 3 minutes, very much like a French press, and then you open the valve, and it flows through the paper filter that you've placed inside, the Melita number 4, and it filters out, you know, the sediments and the essential oils that you would have, like if you'd use a French press like we did last week, you'd have that all left in, but that the filter filters that out, and so it's very similar to an Abid Clever. All right, so let's close the valve so we can prevent, you know, seepage. And ooh, look at that! Look how full that is. All right, so that's the coffee, the Kenya Gitimbe. Nice light tropical notes on the aroma. It's a juicy, tropical, light roasted coffee. You know, these Danish people, they like that lighter Scandinavian style roast. And it's nice. It's nice. It's a bright coffee that, what would this go well with? Pizza, maybe like a cheese pizza. I don't know. I was thinking about that because, you know, yesterday I was testing out frozen pizzas. I got this oven, one of those like old school like slider ovens. And, you know, for pizzas, like you would have at the roller skating rink years ago. And so I ended up, a friend of mine said that the Screamin' Sicilian makes the best frozen pizza. So I gave it a try. And, you know, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not terrible. Good cheese, a lot of cheese. So if you're a bright coffee lover, this is really the type of coffee you're going to love. So if you're just joining us, thanks for tuning in. If you're watching us on the replay, how you doing? Thanks for watching as well. Don't forget to drop your comments below or in the sidebar, right? Is that right? Sidebar this way? Yeah. So if you have a comment, drop it. If you're watching live, drop them in there. If after, drop them in the comments below, and I will make sure that we get to them next week. So I had a question come in from Mark Testa, and I don't have a screen for it, but he was asking me, why do we brew 4 minutes? And I thought that was a great question. And you know what? Why do we brew 4 minutes? To be honest with you, I don't have a satisfactory answer. And I was kind of looking online, trying to figure that out. Why do we really brew 4 minutes? Like and here's something, like I've been in now coffee for nearly 20 years, and that's really what we've been told. Like we've been told, hey, you know, you're supposed to brew, you know, typical brewing is about 4 minutes, 3.5 to 4 minutes. And it's what we teach, it's what we talk about. But do we really understand why? I mean, there is something to be said about water temperature and water ratio. So coffee to water ratio, as well as the water temperature. Water temperature has to be at a, maybe this is what it is. So we talk about water temperature being, let's say 198 degrees Celsius, 198 Fahrenheit, which is what, 96 degrees Celsius. We talk about that, and I think it has to do with the solubles. So we want to extract so much solubles out of the ground coffee. And at a certain temperature, let's say 198, 96 Celsius, we will get that extraction, or TDS, at that temperature, at a certain ratio of coffee to water, in 4 minutes. And if you go longer, it gets bitter. But really, how did we get to 4 minutes? I'm not really clear on that. I'm going to have to consult much more knowledgeable folks than me. So I'll have an answer by next week, or I'll make a video. Maybe I'll make a video. But I thought that was a really, a good thought-provoking question. Like, we talk in espresso making, we talk about the time, the ideal time is somewhere between 20 to 30 seconds. And that's what the Specialty Coffee Association puts out as a standard. This is the area that espresso should be pulled in. And we've already come up with this basic idea through Ernesto Illy years ago, where a single shot of espresso is 7 grams to 1 ounce of water. Now, a lot of people are using more. At Spro, for a double shot, we're using 21 grams. So we're using, a significant percentage more coffee per shot, but there's certain reasons for that. The syrupy, thicker, nicer. To me, to my mind, it's a much nicer way of pulling espresso. However, it doesn't necessarily mean the other ways are wrong or Ernesto Illy's wrong. It's just different. But we do talk about 20 to 30 seconds in espresso. And when I think about it, in espresso making at this level, now that I've been doing it for such a long time, I'm actually looking for time. Time is a variable, but it's not a critical variable for me. It's like, as I'm pulling espresso, I'm actually looking at the performance of the shot visually to help me determine when that shot is done. And even, it may only take, it may take let's say it's at the lower end of the 20 to 30, let's see. Because typically we at Spro, our standard is 25 to 30. But sometimes it may finish at 20, 21, 22. Is that necessarily a bad shot? Based on what I'm seeing at the flow of the espresso, the answer would be no. Because we're basing it on so many other factors than just this one parameter. But I'm going to have to get more into that, because I thought that was really, at first it just seemed like an elementary question, like, oh, why 4 minutes? Well, because that's what we do. But that's really the only answer, is that, well, that's what we do. That's what we've talked about. That's what we've been taught. That's the indoctrination that we've had. So it's actually got to be more complex than that. There has to be something more. So I'm going to look more into that and get back to you guys on it and figure out exactly why are we doing 4 minutes? Who are these Specialty Coffee Association people, and why are they telling us what to do? So speaking of Specialty Coffee Association, this month, September, marks the return of the Specialty Coffee Association's annual expo. And every year, the Specialty Coffee Association has an expo here in the United States. Now, when I say that, let me preface it that there's some history here. The Specialty Coffee, there used to be a group called the Specialty Coffee Association of America, the SCAA. And that, when I got into the coffee business, that was what had been established for almost 10 years. And that became the de facto specialty coffee group, especially in our segment of the industry. So I've gone to every trade show that they've put on since 2003. I've never missed one. I always go because I think it's important to go, and I think there's a lot to learn, a lot of people to see, a lot of friends, a lot of new products, and every year we go. Of course, in 2020, that show that was going to be held in, where was it going to be held? It was going to be held in Portland, Oregon, was canceled because of the pandemic. It was going to be held in April. Again, it was canceled, April 2021. And then that was canceled again, or postponed, actually. And now it's going to be staged at the end of September in New Orleans. And yeah, so September 30th through October 3rd in New Orleans. And, to be honest with you, now with the resurgence of the Delta and the pandemic getting worse, and the situation down in Louisiana, not just with the pandemic, but now also with Hurricane Ida, it's a big question of whether I should be attending or not. I've already got a hotel reserved. Actually, I've got a hotel that ended up getting paid for. So I paid for the hotel back in April or maybe June. And but I haven't bought any plane tickets or anything like that. So the whole thing is like, well, should they or should they not? Oh, let me go back a little bit. So the Specialty Coffee Association of America was the first one. And then eventually there was a Specialty Coffee Association of Europe. That was kind of the competing group. You know, they were the European group, we were the American group. And after so many years of things going on and, you know, years go by, and they decided that they wanted to merge. Personally speaking, I was against the merger. I was, you know, the American, my understanding was the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association of America, was much stronger, in a stronger financial position, a stronger position overall. And I think the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe, what they had going for them was, I think their educational programs were better received worldwide rather than just localized, like the Specialty Coffee, the SCAA's education programs. And there was a lot of push for amongst a lot of the board members at the time. This is maybe 3 years ago, to merge the two and create one Specialty Coffee Association. I was personally against it because I thought that, you know what, if we're the Specialty Coffee Association of America and we're the stronger unit, then we should just wait for them to collapse and then take them over. I know it's a hostile takeover, and it's terrible. But, you know, I mean, we're American, and that's what we're about, you know, so. I don't know, you may or may not agree. But anyway, so that's not what happened. Well, if it was me, I would have, like, you know, I would have done corporate rating. But it wasn't up to me. I'm just the guy on the outside. And so they created they merged their associations, and now they're larger. It's a worldwide organization with different national chapters. And the Specialty Coffee Association now, the SCA, has absorbed both especially the SCAA's trade show and conference, which is the one that I was attended, and they kept their one that they do in Europe every year, every time in June, I think it is. And so they're still going forward with the SCA, which is now an international organization. They're still going forward with the New Orleans event. And so the Specialty Coffee Association U.S. chapter, it's so bizarre to say that, the U.S. chapter has a petition out. Here we go, I'm bringing it up for you so you can see. Has a petition now to postpone the NOLA Expo. And this is by the USA Chapter National Committee and U.S. Competitions Committee. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see what they say. So to our U.S. coffee community, as leadership of the United States Competitions Committee and the United States Chapter of the Specialty Coffee Association, instead of just SCAA, it is our responsibility to ensure that every event we hold is safe, enjoyable, and enriching for everyone who participates. We want you to have an extraordinary experience so that you're able to perform at your highest level with the full support of your community. We want the local community that hosts these competitions to have an opportunity to welcome and support these events in ways that highlight the unique role coffee plays in their businesses and neighborhoods. We take this responsibility seriously, particularly as it relates to your safety, and as of today, we are working closely with the Specialty Coffee Association and encouraging them to postpone the United States Coffee Championship scheduled to take place in New Orleans, September 30th to October 3rd. Is it just me, or does it seem very verbose? Within the context of the ongoing pandemic, we are thoughtfully considering the President's health and safety of the entire group of participants didn't they just say that already? This includes competitors, judges, volunteers, sponsors, and sport teams that is on each view. So all they care about is the competition. We must take into account the dire situation that residents and coffee workers in New Orleans are currently facing following Hurricane Ida. Holding a competition in a city that has been tremendously impacted less than 30 days prior by one of the most significant storms to hit the U.S. coastline in modern times is simply not appropriate. Is it not appropriate? I mean, if they have their infrastructure running, don't they need our business more than ever? It has been a long time since we've been able to safely gather for a competition event, But we believe it's worth waiting a little bit longer so that when we come back, we can all come back together for an event that we can be confident in and proud of, which means that they want to push it. I guess they want to wait until April when the show's scheduled to happen in Boston, which is a much more expensive city. NOLA is a remarkable coffee city. All this verboseness, can't they just spell out New Orleans? NOLA is a remarkable coffee city, and we want to support the local coffee community in the best ways possible. We're continuing our outreach to the local businesses and community, and will further share relief efforts to support NOLA. We sincerely can't wait to return to Crescent City for future coffee events, and we encourage you to review the ways to support the NOLA community today via resources available here. So it's all about coffee competition, not about the actual event. Sincerely, the National Committee of the United States chapter of the SCA, U.S. Coffee Competitions Committee. This is one of those things where it's like, if we were the SCAA still, they could do it on their own. They wouldn't have to ask all this mother may I kind of stuff. But anyway, so that's what's happening. People are trying to see, personally speaking, at this point, I don't know if I'm going to go. And I think a lot of this has to do with, prior to Hurricane Ida, a lot of businesses and individuals that I know in the coffee business industry were pulling out. We're not going to go, mainly because of the resurgence of the COVID virus, the Delta variant, and people in the South, their general refusal to do anything to take responsibility for their actions. So yeah, that's it. So if you're going to the SCA show, if you're planning to go, let me know. I'd be interested to know that you're still going and why. If I end up going, then I'd love to hang out with you, have a coffee. But that's the big news this week. Oh, here's an interesting story from Sprudge. Workers at Colectivo Coffee vote in favor of unionizing. Wow. Voted in favor of unionizing by final tally of 106 to 99. Wow, they've got a lot of people. And will be joining the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, making them their largest cafe. That's a very interesting union to be. So the IBEW. I mean, electrical workers and cafe. Are we, because we work with espresso machines that are electric? I don't know. That's an interesting twist. All right, so let's see. In March, the initial vote ended with a tie. 7 votes still in dispute. The company's co-founders and CEO hired the Labor Relations Institute, a union avoidance firm out of Oklahoma, whose practices some critics have referred to as union busting. At Colectivo, these practices include periodic waves of unexpected firings, mandatory meetings with anti-union speakers, and schedules changing rapidly with little notice, have decimated morale in months. Colectivo Director of Human Resources, LaShonda Hill, stated that we have said from the very beginning that Colectivo is not an anti-union company and is not against our co-workers' right to unionize. It is important to us that this process be conducted fairly and in adherence with the law, which is always corporate speak for, yeah, we're totally against it. This claim of being excluded from meetings is currently being reviewed as part of an NLRB National Labor Relations Board filing, and we expect it to be dismissed just as previous claims brought by the IBEW against Colectivo have been dismissed. Now, let's be honest. No management group wants a union to come in. No, they don't. I mean, it's just much more problematic for them. And so anyone that any corporation that says, "Oh yeah, we want union," they're lying. Even the companies that are like mired in unions, they don't want it. They would prefer not to have it. There's multiple reasons why. It's a lot harder to screw your people, but they also cost them more. So I don't know. Anytime they say, "Oh, we're totally welcome to unions," no, they're not. No, no one is. No one is. Now, with the matter ostensibly settled, leadership at Colectivo state they will abide by it and bargain in good faith. Not before penning an open letter stating the majority of their employees did not vote in favor of unionization. Fewer than 100 of their current 440 employees voted for this union. As historic as the Colectivo union in its own terms, and New York's Gimme Coffee. I wonder, here's something that I would like to learn more about. How has, and this is maybe something that the guys at Spread should take up for their, or maybe I can go make it. I don't know. But how has unionizing coffee shops helped, or how has it changed the face of, how has it helped? Has let's see, so it says Gimme Coffee in New York City, or no, Gimme's not in New York City. Gimme is in Ithaca, New York. So having these companies like Buffalo Spot and Gimme and Ithaca, which aren't necessarily terribly expensive cities to live in. I was thinking more like New York City. But anyway, having a union helped these employees to have better futures. As an employer with Spro, the thing that I've always been concerned, it's always on my mind, is how can we create a better model with a better revenue structure that can allow us to have our staff work. And I don't mean I mean like barista level. How do we get them to a point how do we get our system to a point where they can have a future? And what I mean by that is enough revenue so that they can plan for a future. I remember years ago when Kyle Glanville, who's the owner of Go Get 'Em Tiger in LA now, when he first went to work for Intelligentsia in Los Angeles, that helps them start. I remember I was hanging out one time years ago, and he was like, "Man, I just bought a Volkswagen." His first car. He was so excited. He was like, "I finally have enough money to buy a car." And to be honest with me, I was surprised. I was like, "Wow!" And it really that moment really kind of said to me that I was like, "Man, this is what we really need to be working on more. Is how do we create a better system where our people can do those things. They can buy a new car, buy a house, get married, have families, and not have to struggle too hard. I think especially baristas in most situations, they struggle very, very much, which is why it's only a job that only 20-somethings tend to have, because how do we make that a career level kind of job? Something to enjoy, something to be part of. I mean, it is a very pleasurable kind of job for the right person. So how do we get that person to make enough money so that they can stay? Does it always have to be oh, I'm going to work as a barista and then I'm going to go work and do something else? Maybe work in roastery production, become a roaster, become a green buyer, become something else. But we need a great baristas, because the barista is the person that is on the front lines. That is the person that is talking directly to the guest. So if we can find a way to do that, and if maybe unions are the way to do that, I think about the union that I belong to, which is the IATSC, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees and Motion Picture Machine Operators of the United States and Canada, AFL-CIO. And I've been a member of the IA for over 25 years now. And for those of you who may not be familiar, the IA, the IATSE, is the Union for Motion Picture Production People and also stage. I was on the motion picture side, and it helps to, the union has helped to guarantee better wages and better working conditions. And so, for example, like, I tell you what, like, members within the IA will of course complain about certain things, and there are certain things that are worthy of complaints about. Like, for example, the big thing is our turnaround times, meaning that from the time that you call wrap, from the time that you can be recalled to work, there's only like maybe sometimes an 8-hour gap, 10-hour gap, which is just not enough, at least for safety margins, right? But then again, we've got a situation where you've got a good base pay rate, and then you work 6 hours, and then you get overtime. Is that right? 6? No. You work 6 hours, then you must have a meal, hot sit-down meal. If you don't, there's meal penalties. After 8 hours, you get, overtime. After 12, there's more overtime. After 15, it's a lot more overtime. So there are things like that that are very helpful. And it really kind of struck me when I was in Asia not too long ago, and I was actually in the Philippines, and I was talking to someone that worked in movie production there, and they were like, yeah, we go and work, they'll work almost 24 hours. And the rates aren't very good. And I was like, what? So the unions are great in that they can help to, and so if I compare that system to the system we have under the IA, of course, is much more preferable, much better. So hopefully the unionization with the IBEW will be a good thing for workers overall. All right, so that's what's happening. Let's have a look at some things that are going on in the world. All right, where'd it go? All right, so this is from the group that I participate in, Home Espresso Aficionados, where Andrew Sager's asking any advice about moving my espresso setup to the carpeted bedroom. I agree, it sounds like a terrible idea at first, but for several reasons, I cannot keep it in the kitchen, and we are remodeling in the other hard floor areas. I only use bottled water for the machine, and generally I'm very tidy with how I make my coffee. The sink is only about 30 feet away. A friend suggested putting a carpet run in the front of the table to catch any spills. For me personally, I tend to be relatively messy. So I would be very reticent to put it in a carpeted area in my bedroom. And if I did, maybe go down to Harbor Freight and buy yourself a cheap moving blanket and put that on your floor, especially if you're just doing this temporarily. Then, at least there's something to protect the carpet. Because you know what? As meticulous as you may be, there's always going to be a time when you're going to have some kind of spill. And, the sink is only 30 feet away. 30 feet is a long way away. Like, it's a long, when you have to, when you drop something and you're like, oh my gosh, now I need to clean this up, 30 feet's a long way. I would try to cover the floor with something just to protect it. What else is happening out there? What is your recommendation for cleaning out a hand grinder? I always knock out the excess, but I'm not sure how to do a proper cleaning of it. I mean, if you're going to do it, disassembly is probably a good way to go. You could put rice and run the rice through it. Or you can actually spend real money and buy those Cafiza grinder tablets. Although, right, why would you do that? Just buy cheap parboiled Uncle Ben style rice and run it through there if you need to. But other than that, and I don't even do that. I actually will. If we need to clean, then we'll actually go into the grinder, tear it apart, just the burr areas and the coffee path, and just clean it out. Basically all you got to do is brush and like some paper towels and really just rub everything off and rub everything clean. You don't really need to get too crazy. So here's Filipina Prades asks, I'm a newbie who's wanting to explore more about espressos. Which is a good machine for a newbie like me? Gaggia Classic Pro, Breville Dual Boiler, Lelit Mara X, Rancilio Silvia, Rocket Apartamento. Well, these are some of those are pretty pricey. The Breville Dual Boiler is quite pricey, but I think the Breville Dual Boiler, the Rancilio Silvia, that's a pretty old machine now. That's been out for well over 20 years. So you can, and it's quite affordable. And it also has, because it's been out for 20 years, more than 20 years, there's plenty of mods available. Like you can go through to different coffee forums and they will tell you all kinds of mods that they've done to it. But the thing is, you're still dealing with a very basic machine that you still have to, there's certain things about the single boiler aspect, you just can't overcome that. So I would go with the Breville Dual Boiler, my personal thought. The Oracle, I think is what it's called. And I played around with them at the trade show at the SCA Expo. And they have the one that has I think it's called the Oracle. It has the touch screen, built-in grinder, built-in, portafilter, everything's built in. And you know what? I was really surprised at how well that espresso machine performed. Like it was pretty easy to use for me. Well, for me it was pretty easy, but I would say get that one if you want to. Look at this guy. I've had my machine for about 8 months, and over time my hot water flow has lessened. I have the machine directly plumbed into a softener and filter and test regularly for hardness. Everything else on the machine has been working perfectly. Any ideas? I've cleaned the tip of the wand and it's clean. Let's presume that there's no blockages in the water line. And, your typical water line in a home is delivering water at, what is it, maybe 3 PSI, 4 PSI? Could be a little bit higher, but no. Usually around, 5 PSI or so. So if there's no blockages in your supply line, any valves turned off or anything, then internally what could be happening here is scale buildup. That would be my guess. Scale buildup could be the culprit. Maybe you'd have to tear it apart and see. All right. Anything else? Grinder, Infinite Potential GS3. Here's something from Daniela Martin. Today I took a tour of a coffee roaster and they were saying not to freeze the beans because it shocks the flavor out. It shocks the flavor out? These are the same kind of people that are telling you about epidemiology. All right, so I don't know who in the world would tell you this or what kind of crazy thinking that is. Freeze the bean because it shocks the flavor out. At what point in time have you ever frozen anything and it shocked the flavor out of it? Right? We have frozen pizza. If I take, the frozen pizza I had yesterday, if I took that out, put that in the oven, baked it off, if freezing shocked the flavor out of foods, well, there'd be no flavor. That is just completely the most ridiculous thing I've heard yet. Freezing coffee is perfectly fine. Freezing coffee is probably the best way to go when you want to preserve your coffee. And I've done many tests, well, not even tests necessarily. I've done tests on it, but a lot of this has to do with what I've been doing for years, decades now, freezing coffee, taking the roasted coffee, freezing it, and then grinding it and brewing it. And what you do is basically you take your coffee, you put it, and I keep it in whatever container that it came in. So if it came in a bag, it's still in its original bag. I take that up, I'll roll it up, make sure there's no real air in it. Although there's so little air in the bag, it doesn't matter. I just toss it in the freezer, and I'm done with it. Then if I want to drink it, I'll take the bag out of the freezer, weigh out how much coffee I'm using, and then put the bag back in the freezer. Now, I've heard people talk about how there's, you take the beans out, it's going to condense. Condensation will form. Yes, that could happen, especially if it's really humid. However, you're going to take the bag out. You're going to weigh out your beans. You're going to put the bag back. There's no condensation happening. Nothing. Right? Then you're going to grind. It's that grinding warms the coffee. Right? The physical process of grinding generates heat. So it warms the coffee up from frozen. And never have I had any troubles. And actually, I remember doing a test years ago in 2009. Where were we in 2009? We were somewhere in the world. And I ran into James Hoffman. And James was like, hey, man, here's some coffee for you. So he gave me a bag of their espresso. Awesome, man. Thanks. I appreciate that. So I took it home, and I was like, you know what? I have an idea. I decided that I was going to cup that coffee critically, right? So I cupped the coffee, wrote extensive, cupping notes on it, put it in the freezer. Because I knew that I was opening the Hamden shop later that year. And we hired on a lot of our baristas, our training baristas, in September of 2009. So I spent the first month, every week we're cupping. And then every day we would talk about coffee, taste coffee. So we're always cupping and tasting coffee with them, with the baristas. And so that first month we really spent a lot of time training them how to cup coffee, how to evaluate coffee. So, and we would do weekly cupping. So after about a month or so, I took that coffee that James had given me, the Square Mile, and we always cup blind. So I put that on the table and waited for their notes. So they cupped everything, and they made their notes, and then we discussed. And every time we cup, we discuss. And so the notes that they had tasted from this coffee that had been frozen for 6 months were nearly identical to what I had written down in April. So, and these are people that they don't even know what the coffee is. They're completely in the dark about the origin of the coffee. And so the idea that freezing is bad is just, there's just nothing to support that. Chemically, there's nothing to support that either. There's just so little water. When we buy coffee, it has 11% moisture, right? 11% moisture. When you roast it, you're roasting it down to 2 or 3%. There's really no moisture in the coffee to do anything wrong. For example, a great example is you take green beans, right? If you take green beans, fresh green beans, and you bag them and you put them in the freezer, then you pull them out later, man, they're just destroyed. Just mush, because it's so wet. It's so much water in the green bean that as it freezes, that freezing, that expansion of the water destroys the cellular structure of the green beans. So it's I think in commercial green beans, stuff you buy at the grocery store, they're flash freezing them at very low temperatures at very fast rates, so that it doesn't have that expansion. But if you're putting your own freezer and you're freezing green beans, man, it is just a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. I mean, I remember I did that once with some Harcourt Vert. Never did that again. Yeah, so this is just rubbish. This shocking the flavor out because of freezing is just rubbish. All right, so my light has gone out. The battery's dead. All right, so that's probably going to be it for this week. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to talk more coffee and even cigars, be sure to tune in Thursday night on the Ono Coffee channel at 8 p.m. This week we're actually heading up to New Jersey. We're taking the show on the road. We'll be doing a live stream from the road, and that should be quite interesting. We've got George Brightman, and I think even Cirillo McLean is coming out, and we're going to have the 2015 AeroPress Champion, Rusty Obra, joining us, and he's going to show us his coffee technique and talk about coffee, and it'll be a good time. So if you want to talk coffee and even cigars, come join us Thursday night on the Ono Coffee channel at 8 p.m., and that happens weekly as well, just like here. Also, if you need some coffee, be sure to drop in and to our website, sprocoffee.com. We've got a lot of great coffees, and we got some new stuff coming out soon from Honduras and from Uganda. Really excited about those. And what else is there to tell you? That's it. So tomorrow I'm heading down to Washington, D.C., where I'm going to be doing a cupping, I'll be joining a cupping at the Embassy of Uganda. So I'm really excited to see what they've got going on there, especially since I haven't been able to get to Kampala for nearly 2 years now. Oh, it's been over 2 years. So it'll be nice to see some people from my one of my favorite places in the world. All right, so thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you being with us. If you were watching the live stream, thank you very much for taking the time again. And if you're watching us on the replay, drop your comments below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you'd like to see in the future. Next week, we're going to do a regular show with some coffee brewing, but also we're going to be talking more about kettles. What kind of kettles are out there and what to look for in a kettle, what makes a great kettle. All right, so make sure to check that out. See you next time. Have a great week. And, cheers.